In the last stream, we were working on setting up this contraption here from Pneumaticraft. We have our refinery controller with its associated outputs, turning the crude oil, which we are purchasing automatically from the fluid buyer, into diesel, kerosene, gasoline, and most importantly, LPG. That LPG is then going around into our thermopneumatic processing plant where we are turning it into molten plastic. The whole idea here is that we can take the molten plastic and then, as we saw before, we can either place it down in the world like this to get just one plastic sheet. Alternatively, we can place it into our chest, and if the chest is sufficiently cold, we have a chance of getting two plastic instead of one. The idea here, as we saw, is that for every degree below zero, you increase the percentage by 1%. And so if you get to negative 175 degrees Celsius, you have the maximum 1.75x chance of getting a second plastic. And so if you can keep it below 175 degrees Celsius, then you have a 75% chance of getting two plastic sheets and a 25% chance of getting one plastic sheet, which is good. It allows us to almost double the amount of plastic sheets that we get. And my plan for later in today's stream is going to be to try and improve this setup by fully automating the sending of buckets round to this chest to automate the production of plastic. But also, I think that we should be able to fairly easily set up a few more thermopneumatic processing plants to turn all of our diesel into kerosene, then turn all of that kerosene into gasoline, and then turn all of that gasoline into even more LPG to give us just a ton more plastic. And we already have quite a bit. We've got 16 buckets worth here, and each 100 millibuckets of LPG actually turns into one bucket of plastic, and so we have effectively another 81 buckets of molten plastic in the form of LPG here. We just need to combine that with 81 coal to get a further 81 buckets of plastic. And so we do have a lot of it, and at least initially here, we are going to use some of that to manually get some of these items and work our way through the Electrical Age questline. Before we do that, the very first quest that I would like to work on is this one right here for the blast furnace, because this is how we're going to make steel. And if you've ever played with the immersive engineering blast furnace in the past, you will know that it is very, 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 very slow. And so I feel like we should definitely get this set up sooner rather than later. Thankfully, the recipe for the blast furnace is not particularly difficult. It is just nether bricks, regular bricks, and plastic sheets. We get 3 of those at a time. Much like with the coke ovens, the blast furnace is a 3x3x3 multi-block, so we need 27 blast brick in total, which means we need this recipe 9 times, and as luck would have it, we do have more than 9 plastic sheets available to us, and so it should really just be a case of getting enough brick and enough nether brick to make 9 lots of that recipe. Can we craft clay down into clay balls? We cannot. Sometimes they do add that as a custom recipe. Unfortunately, not this time around. That's fine. We can go ahead, break those, throw them into here, and that should get us more than enough brick to make the blast furnace. Once we have that blast furnace going, the next thing that I would like to work on today is massively improving the throughput of our lava, because as we've seen, even with our kind of rudimentary system, which is currently offline, we're not actively making these compressed mechanisms, but even with this rudimentary system, we're not really bringing the lava through fast enough to keep this going all of the time. We do run out of lava and then have to wait for the train to come back. I think we can fix that by just adding a ton of tanks to the system. If we add a ton more tanks to the train, it's going to be able to carry even more lava every time it goes through. We can add a ton more tanks here to actually store even more lava, and we can add a ton more tanks through in the nether to again store even more lava there to be loaded onto the train and brought through. Now, I did do some testing between streams, and unfortunately, it looks like you can only put the create tanks on the train. You can't add tanks like this one from Thermal Expansion or the tanks from Pneumaticraft. Neither of those worked for me. And so we are going to have to make a ton of the regular create tanks. And to do that, we're going to need a ton of copper plates. Thankfully, in the last stream, we did set up ore processing for basically all of the other ores that we have right here. And so now we do have quite a bit of copper available in the system, and we can go ahead and do something like this. Between streams, I did also reorganize this platform ever so slightly. I've not added anything new, I've just kind of moved things around to make it look a little bit nicer, including moving the chests and the interface here to be in the same spot as they are on the other side of the base. And, of course, in the last stream, we did make the time in a bottle here, which has been slowly accruing time since the end of the last stream. So now we can go ahead and shift right click here to speed up these furnaces, and you can also somewhat speed up the machines from create as well. You'll see if I do this, going up to 4x does make it faster. There is a point though where this stops working, and it might be 16x. Yeah, you'll see if you go too fast, it does still do the animation, but we're not actually gaining in copper sheets at the top of the screen there. So it looks like in this scenario, 8x is as fast as we can go. Over here, how many of these do we need? I think we might need at least 36 of these bricks to make this work. So let's quickly accelerate that to try and get up to 36. Let's also increase the speed on this as well, up to 8x again to make these copper sheets nice and fast. At that point, making a ton of the tanks from Create should be fairly straightforward. And the good news about the tanks from Create as well is that they do connect. And in fact, I'm going to go ahead and throw another stack of copper on there just to maximize our usage of that 8x multiplier. Over here, I'm going to leave those going because we can, of course, buy more clay, and we have access to the full nether, so nether ink is also not really a super valuable resource for us. Instead, let's get at least 27 blast brick here. Perfect. And once we have that, for now, I'm going to put this down over here. This is a very temporary place for it because we are going to hopefully upgrade this to the improved blast furnace, but there is a bit of a catch-22 in that the improved blast furnace does require steel to make, and so initially we do have to make the regular crude blast furnace. In here, we're going to place both coal coke and iron, and because I kind of want to set this and forget this, I think what I'm going to do is grab maybe just a full stack of iron blocks here, as well as a full stack of coal coke. We'll throw that in, and this is going to be even slower than making iron and ingot form because it takes 9 times as long as a regular ingot, but as you can see by the lack of movement on this progress bar here, this is going to take a very, 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 very long time, but when we come back, I'm hopeful that we'll have a decent amount of steel to begin working on some of these immersive engineering machines. Now, while that does its thing, let's go ahead and grab these, and as I mentioned a second ago, if we were to make a bunch more barrels, we should then be able to very easily get ourselves a ton of tanks from Create. If we do something like this and like this, that's going to give us 32 tanks, and the benefit of the Create tanks is that you can put these down either as a 2x2, and you'll see this now has a capacity of 32,000 millibuckets, or you can do a 3x3 like this. This now has a capacity of 72,000 buckets, and if you want to build this taller, the Create tank will actually take 9 tanks at a time out of your inventory and make the tank taller like this. If you don't have enough blocks in your inventory, it will just put 1 down at a time, but just to make life easier, if you have enough, it will put down really as many as it can to fill that level. And you'll see here that we now have a pretty big tank that can hold 216,000 millibuckets. And so essentially what I am going to do here is I'm going to stop the train. I'm going to deconstruct it to allow us to add all of these fluid tanks to the train, just like we did before. That is going to require that we get the super glue out of the system. Thankfully, this has got a ton of durability. We're nowhere near running out on durability for the super glue. And so we'll stop the train, we'll enter assembly mode, we'll add a ton of fluid tanks to the train. I'm also going to replace this fluid cell here with a tall fluid tank from Create as well. That is going to require that we stop this guy, which we can do by removing the train schedule. And I'm probably also going to tweak the train schedule to just have this guy wait a little longer at each station. This is going to require a bit of trial and error, so we'll have to see how long it takes to move the fluids around. But I'm hopeful that with just a bunch more of these fluid tanks, we should be able to get a lot more lava that we can then use for our automation. The second thing to bear in mind, actually, is that the tank doesn't need to be touching the portable fluid interface here, so you can put these tanks anywhere on the train like this, and they will all fill up when this connects. It doesn't have to necessarily all be one connected tank. I'm probably going to make one big connected tank, but if you wanted to, you could put really as many tanks. Whoops, that's the lava burning our train down there, which is not ideal, but you could put really as many of these as you want down. This is probably not my brightest idea, having lava down where we're going to build the train, but that's fine. Okay, so a lot of fluid tanks later, and we now have the ability to hold 360 buckets on the train and hold 576 buckets off the train. And so I'm going to go ahead and assemble the train again. I've also moved the blaze burner in the seat to the front. It looks a little awkward, but I'm fairly certain it should still work. And the Twitch chat is suggesting that it might not be a terrible idea to have a go at doing the fluid cargo condition here. So we could say if the train holds more than, and let's say 350 buckets. Tick. So now if it's got more than 350 buckets, it's going to come through to the overworld. And then here, we'll do the same thing. We'll go fluid cargo condition, and we'll say less than or exactly 0 buckets, maybe? So if it's got exactly 0 buckets in here, I'll change that. Let's go less than 10 buckets. Just so that we don't end up in any weird position where it's got like 300 millibuckets in here because we've used a weird amount and it's not gone to refill, which would just be unnecessary. And then let's put you... Oh, the conductor needs to sit in front of the control block. Okay, fine. In that case, what if I disassemble the train? Can I rotate this control block here? I can't, but I'm assuming I can just kind of break it and replace it like that. That doesn't work. The train controls cannot face sideways. Okay, that means we're going to have to somewhat rethink the design of our train here. Okay, so I've put this guy at the bank, which means he is kind of driving blind, but I think that should work. And now if we give this guy the train schedule, he should head on through the portal here. I'm going to do a quick /back, which should be over in the nether. Over here, I'm going to change the input and output here because you'll see this is filling up, but I think we can get it to fill up faster if we increase the throughput to 8 buckets at a time as opposed to the default 1000 millibuckets at a time. And so hopefully that's a little bit faster. I think if we make some of the augments, those being the integral components from thermal expansion, we could potentially look at increasing the throughput even further here. For now though, if we do a quick /home, we should be able to see our big old tank here getting filled up just as soon as we actually set that up correctly, because I think right now that is not connected. It's not. We need to actually extract from the interface round into this tank, which we could do with either a pipe from Create, which would require the pump, or we can do that with a pipe from Pipes. And if we wanted to make that faster, we could also look at making another pipe upgrade, one of these right here. These are fairly straightforward. The basic pipe upgrade is okay, the improved pipe upgrade is better, and the advanced pipe upgrade is the best, but it does require a few diamonds. Thankfully, that is not a problem for us. And now, back over here, we should be able to dump that pipe upgrade in like so, and we'll go from transferring 50 millibuckets per tick at the top to transferring 2,000 millibuckets per tick, which is going to fill this tank up much, much faster. To do this, we did have to go ahead and temporarily disconnect the fluid interface that we were using before, but hopefully now, if we just do something like this and like this, we're going to reconnect up this to the system, and we should start seeing that lava being used over for our buckets, and I'm hopeful that we can now re-engage this pressure chamber by putting that down, and I'm hopeful that we see a constant stream of lava in this fluid cell, even when the lava buckets get sent around, used up, and sent back. We do. Nice. So that is still working. The lava is still being sent around to that fluid cell, and I'm fairly certain now that we should have enough of a backlog of lava in this giant tank here to where we always have lava for that to work, because we've got 576 buckets here, and then even more buckets over here as well. It could be potentially a better idea to have this work on a timer as opposed to waiting till it's empty, because right now this is full. This is not going to go back to the nether until this gets empty, which seems like a bit of a waste, because it means if we need a big burst of lava, we're not going to have it. What I might do is I might just tweak the schedule and just say less than 150 buckets maybe. So if it's less than half full, or maybe 175 if we really want to go closer to half, if it's less than half full, it should go back. Cool. And that way we've always got, you know, at least 700-ish, 750-ish buckets of lava available to us at all times, which for now at least should be fine. So back over here, I do believe that we should have at least 1 block of steel. We do, we have 2. We can craft those down into 18 steel ingots. That should complete this quest here, although again, it wants us to have the steel from immersive engineering, and we don't have the steel from immersive engineering, so for now that quest is, I guess, not going to be completed. We might be able to complete the quest if we throw in 1 iron ingot as opposed to 1 block of iron. Let me do that real quick just to see if that does let us complete the quest. Now that we have steel though, we can start making things like these steel mechanical components, which are necessary for making these immersive engineering machines. So speaking of these, if we want to get these set up, we need a ton of these heavy, light, and redstone engineering blocks. All of these multi-blocks require some number of all 3 of these blocks. I'm fairly certain every single one requires at least 1 redstone engineering block, and then some of the bigger machines require the heavy, some of the smaller machines require the light, and some require a combo of all of them. But to get there, we first have to make a bunch of these electrical components because all of the engineering blocks here require those electrical components in the middle. Thankfully, these should be pretty straightforward to make. To do that, we do first have to make an engineer's workbench. This should be fairly straightforward. It is basically just a bunch of treated wood. I don't actually know if we have any treated wood in the system. We do, but probably not enough. And so I think what we'll do real quick is go ahead and grab a few buckets here so we can craft up a bunch more treated wood. And speaking of treated wood, which is of course made with creosote, what I might also do as well here is make even more of these fluid tanks, or at the very least take the fluid tanks we have and potentially set up a big old buffer for creosote on this bottom platform, because again, we're backing up on creosote now. So basically right here, I'm going to put a fluid exporter. I'm going to put in the variable card to export specifically creosote, and then I'm just going to change the priority on this part to like -5. I think that should mean that any creosote that we produce should try and go up into this setup over here, into our spout. And only if the spout is full, I'm going to set this to priority 10 just in case the -5 doesn't work, but everything should try to go here. If this is full and is not accepting more creosote, then the overflow creosote is what's going to go into that tank. Looking ahead a little bit, we do need to make these circuit backplates, and to make these, we also need Duraplast sheets. These are made with phenolic resin, which is made with creosote and another liquid. So we are going to need creosote later on, and so having a backlog of it, probably not a terrible idea. At some point, we're probably going to have to increase just the speed at which we're producing creosote even further. For now, though, that should allow us to make some of those Duraplast sheets without having to worry too much about it. Back over here, we do, thankfully, have the right steel this time around. I don't think it matters too much. I think either steel would work. I'm going to put the blocks back in there to, again, kind of passively start generating more steel. And now, let's see if we can't make some of these electronic components. So, to do that, we need the aforementioned engineer's workbench, which, of course, Isaac, is the whole reason that you went down there. Let me quickly go and grab a few more buckets of creosote. I did completely forget that we can only make creosote planks or treated planks here with the spout. We actually can't craft them in this pack with a bucket of creosote, and so we are going to have to siphon these off from here. We could set up another spout and like a depot to make them in bulk if we wanted to, but for now, the engineer's workbench isn't actually going to require that much treated wood. And so if we make 6 slabs, and if we make 1 set of sticks, I think that might almost be everything, although I think we might need a second set of sticks here, because we need 4 sticks for the engineer's crafting table, as well as 1 regular crafting table. And then on top of that, we need 2 slabs, and we need a fence. Boom, and boom. Nice. So let's go ahead and throw this guy down, I guess for now, right about here. And the idea with the engineer's workbench here is that you can put multiple different blueprints into the slot on the left-hand side, all of these ones right here, and depending on what blueprint you put in, that's going to determine what items you can craft. For us, it looks like it wants us to start by making the engineer's blueprint. This is made with 3 paper, 3 plastic, and then 1 iron, 1 aluminum, and 1 copper. I think we have almost all of that. The thing we don't have by the looks of it is 3 plastic sheets. We've got 1 in the system, we've got 1 essentially in our inventory here in bucket form, and of course we have more in our thermopneumatic processing plant. Right now, this chest is not very cold. That's because the south side, or the hot side of this vortex tube, as you can see, is very, 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 very hot. And if we look at the tooltip for the vortex tube again, you'll see that it does say, mind that there is a weak thermal connection between the hot and cold sides, so for best efficiency, you should vent the cold side with a heatsink when you want to utilize heat, or vice versa if you want to utilize cold. And so essentially, right now, because the hot side is so very hot, it's preventing the cold side from getting cold, because supposedly there's a weak thermal connection in the middle there. What we could do is we could move this and we could use some heat sinks to dissipate that hot heat. For now, I'm not going to worry about that too much because we have a ton of plastic and we actually only need 2 pieces to make this happen. But going forward, we are going to do some work with the heat pipes and the heat sinks to hopefully dissipate either hot or cold temperature to make our vortex tubes work more effectively for us. For now, though, let's try one more time to make the engineer's blueprint. And now, if we put this into our engineer's workbench, you could see that we can make things like the electrical components. To do this, we need to get compressed mechanisms, capacitors, transistors, and copper wire. Most of this is fairly straightforward. The compressed mechanisms we're of course already making with our pressure chamber. The copper wire here we can either craft with the engineer's wire cutters, or we can use the rolling mill that we made previously. We just put a copper plate, which we can make with our mechanical press, through the rolling mill, we get copper wire, and then from there we need transistors and capacitors, and these are kind of the next quests on the quest line here. To make the transistors and capacitors, both of these do require the pressure chamber. Again, we're probably going to make a brand new pressure chamber because I don't really want to interfere with the ones that we already have down, but I think initially we'll make a new pressure chamber, and then I'll probably just see about making a stack of transistors and a stack of capacitors so that we can do some crafting, and then we'll look back at automating this when it comes time to automate the finished PCBs, because these do require those electrical components en masse. And so to do both of these doesn't require too much, actually. We need a ton of plastic with redstone and gold wire. Gold wire, much like the copper wire, is just gold plates through the rolling mill. And then as for the transistor here, this requires plastic sheets, silicon, and more gold wire. So if we wanted to make a stack of each recipe, or should I say 2 stacks of transistors and 2 stacks of capacitors, for each one we would put in a stack of plastic, so we want 2 stacks of plastic with 2 stacks of gold wire, 1 stack of redstone, and 1 stack of silicon. The silicon here we can make by smelting nether quartz. Nether quartz we can either just mine, alternatively, it does point out here that we can bulk wash soul sand as well as a way of getting nether quartz. There is only a 12% chance here, so it's not a particularly good chance, and given that we do have 59 nether quartz in the system, I'm probably just going to take that, smelt it down, and then head back through to the nether to mine more nether quartz as and when we need it. We will, of course, definitely set up the automation for soul sand and for nether quartz, and therefore for silicon, when we automate the transistors. But again, for now, though, we're not looking to automate this electrical component. We're just looking to make enough of them to start making some of these multi-block structures. So I'll leave that smelting there. While that smelts, let me get a stack or 2 of gold. We'll throw those over here. Again, our time in a bottle is going to help tremendously in making that a fair bit faster. We can also get some copper sheets as well, because we're going to need the copper wire. Thankfully, we have some of those left over from all of the tanks that we made. And so, yeah, it really shouldn't be too difficult to make this. Let me just quickly go ahead and make our 3rd pressure chamber. Okay, so I've built another pressure chamber here, just a standard 3x3, and I did pop through to the nether real quick, and using our gold pickaxe, which is now broken because we used it, we got some more nether quartz to give us a full stack of silicon. Over here, we've also put down the rolling mill, so we're getting gold wire and copper wire. We've got loads of that coming through, which is good. And instead of using the compressors here, we're actually going to pivot over to using, I think, the fluid compressors from Pneumatic Craft, because these are kind of going to let us cut out the middleman, and they have a huge benefit in that they can be accelerated using the speed upgrades from Pneumatic Craft, which, as we saw before, are super easy to make in this pack. So to make the liquid compressor, we need 2 pressure tubes, 1 small fluid tank, 2 leather, and an air compressor. The air compressor does require the rotational compressor, and it looks like we might just need some more pressure tubing to make another one of these rotational compressors. From there, we should be able to make the air compressor. We can. And from there, we should also be able to make the liquid compressor just as soon as we get some leather, because right now we actually don't have any leather. Thankfully, we can go ahead and smelt up tough fabric to get leather, and the tough fabric is just a stick and some industrial hemp fiber. We don't currently have much industrial hemp fiber, but of course, we do have our little plot of it on the ground here, and so if we were to quickly grab our growing hoe out of the system, we should be able to very quickly gather a large amount of industrial hemp, craft that with some sticks, and then smelt it to get really as much leather as we like. 1 and 2. Perfect. We can smelt those up very quickly over in here. Our silicon is now done. Fantastic. Our inventory is a little bit full. But essentially here, once we have the fluid compressor, which is actually called the liquid compressor, we should be able to cut out the middleman, because right now we're bringing lava over from the nether, using that lava to turn a steam engine, and then over here we're using that steam engine to turn these compressors, which are producing pressure. If we get the liquid compressor, we can, as I mentioned, cut out the middleman. We can go straight from the lava into the fluid compressor, and then that's going to make the pressure that we need for our setup. Anyway, back over here, we have some leather. Let's do one of these to get the liquid compressor. And as I mentioned, now we can put lava directly into that liquid compressor and use speed upgrades to make it much, much faster than our compressors that we currently are using. So I'm going to put this down over here. We do need to export lava to this, and especially if we put 10 speed upgrades in here, this thing is going to start to chew through lava at a staggering speed, which is kind of one of the main reasons why I wanted to start today by massively improving our lava infrastructure. And so let me grab some more of the pressure tubes. Let's also grab another safety module to make sure that we do not end up breaking things here. We can also put a safety module into the liquid compressor itself, which is something we can't do with the rotational compressors. The safety module, which is actually called the security upgrade, is pretty straightforward. Nice. And so we can place this directly into our liquid compressor. That will stop the liquid compressor from exploding because this will now on its own dissipate any pressure before it gets too high. It won't stop the pressure getting too high anywhere else in the system though, especially if we add even more liquid compressors. And so just as an additional line of safety, I am still going to go ahead and put another safety tube module down on the actual pipe itself. Okay, so I've run another logic cable over to here, and I've placed down the fluid exporter. We're going to export lava. I've configured the card here, so let's do this. This should now fill up with lava. It does, and we should see the pressure start to build. Now, as I mentioned, the big benefit here is the ability to put speed upgrades in, which you can't do with the rotational compressors. And so if we were to grab 10 of these, which is the maximum that we can do, we can put them all in, and it's going to start using the lava a lot faster. But I'm hopeful that we just kind of have enough lava to where it's not really a problem, and you'll see the pressure is going up much, much faster now. And so let's see then, I guess, if we can't make this happen. To do that, we are going to need a lot of plastic though, actually. And so one thing we can do is we can go ahead and take these machines back. So I'm going to take the vortex tube away because it's kind of useless in its current position, given that we have no heat sinks. And instead, we can kind of temporarily tap into the power being generated by this liquid compressor to also power our vortex tube. So if we put this down, let's say this way, there's probably a way to rotate that without having to pick it up. But to the best of my knowledge, I don't think that the engineer's hammer works on it. And so let's grab a bit more tubing and let's get that connected up to the system. And then from there, we're going to want to grab some heat sinks. The heat sinks can be placed directly onto the vortex tube. To make these, by the way, we need iron bars, some compressed iron, and some gold. We are running a little low on compressed iron, simply due to the fact that we're using so much of it over here, and we're actually full up on mechanisms. What I'm going to do, I'm going to take a few stacks of mechanisms and put them in the system, and then I'm going to re-engage the pusher module over here, so we actually start selling these modules again, because right now we're not selling them at all, which is why we are not currently making any money. But if we replace this in here, we should start to rapidly sell those mechanisms, which will hopefully massively increase the amount of money that we have and also stop this from backing up, which would also be ideal. Also, we can make, of course, compressed iron in the other compressor as well temporarily. If we take some iron here, we could just grab another hopper and just pump directly round into this pressure chamber to make some more compressed iron. And a stack of compressed iron later, we can now hopefully craft up the heatsink. So the heatsink, as I mentioned, super straightforward. You can just put this directly on the vortex tube. Alternatively though, you can also make these heat pipes. These do require a lot more compressed iron to make. They're actually rather expensive. You get 6 at a time, but it requires 3 blocks of compressed iron to make one batch of heat pipe. It also requires more of this thermal lagging as well. We do seem to be having a bit of an issue with our system here, where for some reason, sometimes it doesn't let me put stuff in the system, but then if you leave and go back in, it works. Not quite sure what's up with that, but either way, now that we have the heatsink and the heat pipe, what we should be able to do is place down the heat pipe like this, and then put down, if we wanted to, multiple heat sinks onto this heat pipe to dissipate the extra heat that's being produced. Then from there, we can put down our heat frame onto yet another chest on the cold side of the vortex tube, and that should allow the vortex tube to become much colder than it otherwise would be able to, because of the fact that we're dissipating all of the heat on the other side. So let's put you here, let's put you here. We are going to want to get another terminal set up on this platform as well, so we can again access that without running backwards and forwards. But in the meantime, if we grab some more of the pressure tubing here, we should be able to connect the liquid compressor up to our vortex tube like this. That should very quickly lower the temperature of this chest. Again, here you can see that the hot side is getting hot, but it's getting nowhere near as hot as the cold side is getting cold. And that's because here that temperature is being dispersed amongst the heat pipe, and then the heat sink is dispersing that temperature out into the air, which is good. And over here, you'll see that we now have a very cold chest. Actually, the coldest it can get, negative 273 degrees Celsius. And so all we need to do now is grab our buckets of plastic and place those into this chest. I'm fairly certain that we might also be able to just put a tank in here. I think if we fill up a small fluid tank with plastic, I think we can probably put that in and it should have the same effect. Let me quickly give that a try. If I take this guy and I right click here, I do fill up with 16 buckets of plastic. Can I then just put that directly into here? I totally can, and so long as the chest is cold enough, it works. You'll see the temperature is rising. Once it gets to above 175, we want to kind of slow it down a bit to maximize our returns here, but we are getting a lot of plastic from this. We probably don't need to be quite this meticulous about getting the maximum number of plastic sheets, but if we do this a few more times, we should be able to very quickly get the 2 stacks of plastic sheets that we're going to need to make our first lot of both transistors and capacitors. All right, and so once we have at least 2 stacks of plastic sheets, I think we are good to go here. So in terms of making the capacitor, we need the gold wire, the plastic sheets, and then just a stack of redstone, which we actually might not have. We've been using quite a bit of redstone lately. Never mind, we totally do. Perfect. And then for the transistor, the same thing, but with the silicon. Perfect. We have both of those. We're actually going to get 2 stacks of transistors and capacitors here. That is completely fine, and I am going to go ahead and make even more speed upgrades here because, again, ideally, we would like to have 10 speed upgrades in both the input and output faces of the pressure chamber. So real quick, let's see if we can't make 13 more of these. It's really going to come down to if we have enough lapis, which we totally do. Perfect. Let's go ahead and get rid of the rest of those. And then now back over here, we should be able to put 10 speed upgrades in here. Boom. And 10 speed upgrades in over here, boom. And then I think we can kind of just throw everything in. The limiting factor is definitely going to be the speed of this hopper, actually. That's going to be the slowest part of pumping items in. And so I think what we'll also do is kind of just swap that out immediately. So let's do this, and let's do this. We're going to put you here, and we're just going to say export all items. No filter required. Open here, boom, boom, boom. That should move all 3 of those in a stack at a time. And then, of course, now that we have the speed upgrade, those should move in a stack at a time, assuming the pressure is high enough, which hopefully it is because we have our liquid compressor here. If you really want to play with fire, you can use the time in the bottle on the liquid compressor. Do bear in mind, though, that there is a limit on how much the pressure safety valve and the security upgrade can kind of release pressure. If you accelerate this to like 128x, it's going to explode despite the safety precautions in place because it's just too much pressure all at once, which is not ideal. So do bear that in mind. It does appear that we've made a multitude of things here. Let me put in the plastic sheets, the gold wire, and the rest of the redstone. I don't know what I put in here, but I've put in kind of a haphazard concoction of stuff. I'm going to put everything in, and I'm pretty sure it should just make 2 stacks of transistors and 2 stacks of capacitors. There are a few quests for us to complete, though, before we get to the quest for the transistor. One of those quests is for silicon, which we have just used all of our silicon. So real quick, let me throw 1 more nether quartz into our furnace just to get 1 silicon. And then let's also quickly head through to the nether to see if we can't find some soul sand. Okay, so we didn't have really any soul sand near us in the nether that I could see. We did use the free cam to fly around a bit and try and find some, but I figured it would be faster for us to come back, throw down an encased fan, throw down some more chain drive, get out of the depot, and here we can bulk haunt our sand into soul sand. And what we should be able to do here is purchase a soul campfire for $500 from the store, and I'm fairly certain that if we put that in front of the fan here, that we should be able to do some bulk haunting. I think this just goes here, like that. I don't believe we put it 1 block further down, and you'll know it's working when you see the blue particle effect. As soon as that is done, we get soul sand. Nice. There is that quest complete. We should also now be able to complete the quests for nether quartz because we already have some in the system. Silicon, of course, we have. Perfect. And back over here, we should now be fully done up, I think, on 2 stacks of transistors and capacitors. We are. Nice. And given all of that, I think we're in a good spot here to make quite a few of these electronic components. So back over here, do we have any copper wire. We've got 64 in here, which is perfect. And so if we throw in a stack of transistors, a stack of capacitors, a stack of copper wire, now we're just missing compressed mechanisms. Of course, we did save multiple stacks of compressed mechanisms earlier. So if I throw a full stack of those in here, we can make a full stack or half a stack of electronic components because we need 2 copper wire per component. That, though, is fine. If we wanted more copper wire, we could go ahead and get more copper. Again, ideally, we'd want 32 copper plates. That's fine. We can do this, and we can do this. And as soon as we have 32 of those, we can run them through the rolling mill. That's going to get us another stack of copper wire, which will get us another 32 of these electronic components, which I'm hopeful is going to be a somewhat decent amount to get started here with these multi-block structures. So let me take you, let me put you in here, let me dump these coins into the system for a very small amount of change, and let's put these transistors and capacitors away into the system for future use for the time being. You can also accelerate this as well, of course, again, up to a maximum of 8x. It's the same as the mechanical press. And once we have a stack, boom, boom, and boom. Nice. So now we have a stack and the 8 from a quest reward of these electronic components. In terms of these steel mechanical components, these are made with steel sheets and copper. Again, fairly straightforward, and we do now have 5 blocks of steel in here. I am going to keep this train going. We've got a lot of coal coke to the point where I'm going to go ahead and make quite a few blocks of coal coke here because I think those are going to last even longer as a fuel source, so we don't have to keep coming back and manually topping this up. So if we do this, we do have to take out the slag. If you don't take out the slag, then it will not work. Again, I don't know why this is not clearing. It's one of those situations where it's not letting me put items in there, but if I leave and go back in, it does let me put items in. Not quite sure why that's an issue, but either way, we have even more steel now, which is perfect. Over here, we can turn that steel into steel plates, and once we have at least 2 steel plates, we can take those and combine them with 1 copper ingot in our engineer's workbench, boom, and boom, to make these steel mechanical components, which are going to be needed in order to make, I believe, the heavy engineering blocks, and I think the light engineering blocks require iron mechanical components, which are made in much the same way, but just with iron plates instead of steel plates. And so if we do this, we can make 2 iron plates, and then once again, we can run that with 1 more copper ingot to get our first iron mechanical component. And again, the quest book does give us a bunch of those as a quest reward, which is very nice indeed. And so now we should be pretty close to being able to make quite a few of these. Of course, if we did want to make a few of these, we would need a lot more of these steel mechanical components. I think I'm going to put off making some of these immersive engineering machines until the next episode. What I want to do with the remainder of today's episode is kind of optimize some of our systems. So over here, as I mentioned at the start of the episode, I do want to move this setup over, I think, to this new platform and try and automate the creation of plastic so that we're not manually doing this every single time. And I think what we'll probably do here is we will probably do away with using the blaze burners. And I think I'm going to focus solely on using the vortex tubes to heat up our refinery and our thermopneumatic processing plant, especially the thermopneumatic processing plant, because if we do want to turn things like diesel into LPG, the temperature required in the thermopneumatic processing plant is very, very, very high. If we look at LPG here, just to turn the gasoline into LPG, we need a temperature of over 300 degrees Celsius, and I think that's really only going to be doable with the vortex tubes. And so real quick, I'm going to make a few more thermopneumatic processing plants, enough to do all of the converting. I'm going to make a few more vortex tubes, enough to heat up all of those thermopneumatic processing plants, and then we'll look at setting up automation to move the molten plastic from the thermopneumatic processing plant round into the chest to turn it into regular plastic sheets, so that in the future, we can hopefully more easily automate these electric components. Okay, so I've moved the refinery over to here, and I've crafted 3 more thermopneumatic processing plants that are now in the middle here, and then we have the old one that was turning LPG into plastic on the end. All of these do retain their inventories, which is why some of them have resources inside of them. Essentially, what we are going to do here, we have our fluid buyer, that's going to stay the same, that's going to extract oil infinitely into the refinery. That refinery, if it gets hot enough, is going to make the diesel, the kerosene, the gasoline, and the LPG. We're now going to use the vortex tube here to heat up all of these. So I've made all these vortex tubes, they're all connected up, and if you want to turn the diesel into kerosene, the kerosene into gasoline, the gasoline into LPG, that's where it gets a little tricky, because not only do you require 300 degrees Celsius, but it also requires heat as well. You'll see in here that if we want to turn, for example, kerosene into gasoline, we need a temperature greater than 300 degrees Celsius, and we need a pressure of at least 2 bar. And so on the back here, I have gone ahead and connected these up. I don't think we need a tube here. I don't think we need any pressure for turning LPG into molten plastic. I'm fairly certain that is the case. Yeah, this one has the pressure gauge, but doesn't actually require any pressure. These three do. And so if we do this, that's going to connect all of these up to that. So these should all start gaining pressure. Again, I'm hopeful that with the way we have this set up, the pressure should never be more than 5 bar over here, but we could always look at adding some safety modules around here if we really wanted to be extra safe. And again here, the temperature along the top is going to go up. There are a few things we can do. The first thing, of course, is we can put down some of the lagging to allow us to insulate these machines and hopefully retain some of that temperature. We can also look at using heat pipe and heat sinks on the bottom of these vortex tubes to dissipate some of that coldness to allow us to basically increase the bottom temperature of the vortex tube, which again, because of that weak thermal connective membrane, is going to allow us to increase the top temperature even further, which I definitely do think is going to be sensible. Before that though, what we're also going to do is we're also going to do something like this. And I'm going to not set any of these to export just yet, but essentially we want to have all of the diesel, which is here, going into here. That is going to turn the diesel into kerosene. The kerosene is going to go from here to here. We're also going to push the diesel from here into here once it becomes kerosene. And so the kerosene is going to go here. The diesel is going to go here, become kerosene, also go here. The kerosene is going to get turned into gasoline, which is also coming from here. And then that gasoline is going to get turned into LPG. And that LPG is going to come from the very top. I don't know why it's putting it on that side of the machine, but if we run this all the way around, ideally more like this, what we're then going to do is we're then going to disconnect here, 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 and here, and then of course here, 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 and here, like that. And then now we should be able to just set these to extract. Those are going to pull the relevant liquids around into the relevant thermopneumatic processing plants, and then we need to get dispenser upgrades. These will allow us to auto-eject. In here, you can see dispenser upgrades. It will try to auto-eject liquids into adjacent tanks, and so that will just push each liquid to the next thermopneumatic processing plant. Thankfully, these don't look too difficult to make. We need some more of these upgrade components, which are just lapis, nether quartz, and then a dispenser. All of that seems fairly straightforward. So if we can get, let's say, I think 4 of these would be ideal. We are going to need some burrs. That is fine, because of course we can use our industrial hemp fiber here to make string. And so let's quickly get 1, 2, 3 more of those. That should be everything for 4 dispensers, and those 4 dispensers should be everything for 4 dispenser modules. Nice. And so over here, we're just going to put those into each and every one of the thermopneumatic processing plants. That's going to allow this guy to eject to here, this guy to eject to here, this guy to eject to here, and then this guy we're going to have auto-eject into this small fluid tank right here, like that. The reason I want the small fluid tank here is that I'm then going to use a system that puts buckets into here. You'll see there is an interface in here to fill a bucket up, and so we can just pipe a bucket into here, then have a pipe extract that bucket round into this chest. So we're going to move the chest we currently have with the heat frame. We're going to move that round to, let's say, here. We are, of course, going to put the vortex tube back underneath that. And, of course, let's try not to lose as much pressure as we can. Let's put that here. I was wrong at the start of the episode, by the way. You can totally rotate this with the hammer. It does work. If we do something like that, that is now ready to go. And so we can just do something like this to get the pressure into there. That's going to cool down the chest. And so all we would have to do is pipe from here into here, basically whitelisting buckets full of plastic into the chest. And then once the chest has turned that into an empty bucket and some plastic, we're then going to pull the empty bucket back round into the small fluid tank to again fill up with more plastic and continue that process forever. And so now I think we really kind of just need to work on the heat, because if we look at our thermopneumatic processing plants, I'm fairly certain we're nowhere near, or not really close yet, to 300 degrees Celsius. And I think it's just because of the fact that we are at negative 273 degrees Celsius on the bottom side. So let me throw down some heat pipe onto the bottom of all of these like this. And then let's also make a few more heat sinks to dissipate that heat even further. But you can see already the temperature at the top is going up as the temperature of the bottom goes up as well, like as it gets closer to 0. I don't really want to put these here because I would like to get this covered back up again. So I'm going to put these on the bottom like this. We might end up needing to make even more heat pipe to put down even more heat sinks, but I'm hopeful that this should start to work. People were asking why I don't use the cold side of one vortex tube on the chest and the hot side on the thermopneumatic processing plant. And again, it all comes down to that thin membrane in the middle, that bad heat conductivity. We need the top side of these to be over 300 degrees Celsius. If the top side of these are over 300 degrees, that means the bottom side isn't going to be cold enough to get the benefit out of the plastic doubling. And so I think the best system here is one where you have dedicated vortex tubes for each part of the system, and then you use the heat pipes and the heat sinks to dissipate the hot and cold, irrespective of the two different systems, if that makes sense. And so I'm going to make more heat pipes. I'm going to make more heat sinks. That's hopefully going to allow our temperature to get higher. You'll see here we are actually at 300 degrees, so this should start working soon at converting that, and should start moving it over as well, assuming that the pressure is right. And, oh, the temperature's not quite there. We're getting close, though. 299. It looks like it's there. There we go. Look at that, and it's working. So, again, the hotter it is, the faster it'll go, and so we're going to make even more heat pipes and even more heat sinks. Okay, so not too long later, and real quick, chat has told me that when you're putting together a variable card inside of the portable logic programmer, you can actually drag from JEI. So here we're making a fluid card for lava. We can just drag that. You don't actually have to have a bucket of lava in your inventory, which is actually super useful information. Over here, I have acquired all of the stuff to set up a second liquid compressor, like this. The reason for that, can I rotate this like that? I can. I don't think that kind of passes pressure through, though. It might, but just to be safe, I'm going to do this, like that, and then we're going to put the security upgrade in and the 10 speed upgrades in. So we're going to increase our pressure production quite a bit, because I think that's kind of our only issue now. Over here, we are ready to export coal, just like we were before. It's not actually hooked up yet, but if we head down here, we should be able to connect that up, and we can just about reach the roof here. It's a little awkward, but it does work, and I'm hopeful that we can do that. Nice. So now we should see coal being exported. I'm hopeful that the temperatures are low enough or high enough, depending on the side. I have put down heat sinks on both sides there. We could make more heat pipe if needs be to kind of dissipate more heat or more cold, but it looks like this is working. You'll see the temperature there is at 415, 416, 430. It's dropping, but the reason it's dropping is just because things are happening and the pressure is now high enough. Before, we were running into an issue where the temperature was high enough, but the pressure was not high enough, and so we were running into issues there. But it looks like this is now working. The diesel is being converted into kerosene, the kerosene is being converted into gasoline, the gasoline into LPG, and so now the final piece of the puzzle is to get this this kind of loop at the back set up. So what we are going to do is we're going to extract from here. For that, of course, we need the bucket, but we're basically going to take an item out of here into here and then loop it back around. I think I'm going to use integrated dynamics for this, simply due to the fact that it's very customizable in terms of how often we send the items. As we saw before, we can configure the ticks per operation, which is going to allow us to maximize the amount of plastic we get by ensuring that we set it up in such a way that the temperature of the heat frame is always at negative 175, and we're going to do that just through timing. We're not going to do any kind of special reading of the temperature. We're just going to try and configure the timing in such a way that the kind of buckets move around slow enough that the temperature is always cold enough to get us maximum efficiency on our plastic. Speaking of which, I would also like to get a drawer to hold that plastic as well, and we'll probably put a puller module into there to pull that plastic around once it's been made. We'll take you, and then from there, let me grab a bucket. We might do 2 buckets, actually, to keep the system going somewhat quickly. Although, actually, I think 1 might be fine, given the fact that we're probably going to slow things down. And then we'll take 2 item interfaces, and we'll also take another item exporter. And from there, I think it should just be a case of setting up the variable cards correctly, because what we're going to do is kind of set up 2 mini networks here. We're going to have one that pulls from here and sends around to here, and then we're going to have one on the top that pulls from here and sends around to here. Real quick, let me fill in this hole so we don't fall through it, and let's set this up, shall we? So let's do this and this. This one here is just going to pull empty buckets. So we want a variable card for an item, and that item is going to be empty buckets, like that. That card is going to go into the top here, and there's no need to configure this to be slower, because basically as soon as there's an empty bucket in here, we want that to get pulled over into that tank. On the back side here, we want to set up another item variable card. This time we're going to do it for a bucket of molten plastic, which I believe is this one right here. So we're going to drag that over. And then from there, we're going to set that into here, export item, but we're going to slow this down to, let's start with 20 ticks. So if we do that, now, if I put the bucket in here, it should get extracted and sent round to here. It does. It then gets filled up, and then once per second, it should get sent around back into here. That's going to make plastic sheets, and then immediately that bucket gets pulled back, and it moves around. And so now we have automated the production of plastic, and currently the temperature does seem to be staying above negative 175, and so there's probably a little bit of wiggle room in terms of us bringing that number down a little bit. Boom, and boom, we'll set this to pull from, I think it's the south. It is indeed the south. Like that. And there we go. We have plastic automated. The temperature is holding steady. Let me tweak this down to 15 ticks, like that. Not that it really matters too much. So long as it's coming in, that's fine. Right now, of course, we're not really using this at all, and it is eventually going to back up entirely. But it looks like even at 15 ticks, this is kind of holding up just fine. Of course, eventually, we're going to back up on all of these. You can see already we're backing up so much on LPG, which is fine. It's not really an issue at all. All we really do when we back up is kind of waste lava, as we are already doing, I guess, with all of the pressure that's escaping here. But if we look over in the distance there, we're actually kind of losing lava, which is potentially an issue. So we might have to tweak our lava setup to bring even more lava in even faster, because we might actually be burning through it too fast now. But really, I think that should just be a case of increasing our tank's capacity, or maybe even adding a second train to the setup as well. Either of those, I think, could work to keep that going. But it looks like this might be working. The temperature looks like it could be going down a bit too fast, but for the most part, it looks like it's kind of holding up below negative 175 degrees Celsius, and so I'm fairly confident that that is maximizing the amount of plastic that we can produce. And so next time, chat, we're going to come back and we're going to work on getting our first immersive engineering machines. We're also going to do a little bit of kind of back to basics work as well, because we are actually out of iron. I've had to disconnect the pressure chamber again because of the fact that we have basically no iron ingots, because the iron is being used, of course, by the pressure chamber there to make compressed iron, and we're not making the iron fast enough. Down here, the little system that we have producing all of our ingots is fine for the stuff that we're not using actively, but the iron here is nowhere near quick enough. So we're going to have to work to improve the iron production. I also do want to set up full automation again for cobblestone. I want to set up automation for regular stone, and then also for like gravel, sand, and glass. And then also, I guess while we're at it, soul sand and nether quartz are probably not going to be too difficult either. It's all just a bunch of encased fans with depots and then like different items in between, whether we're washing or bulk haunting. We're also going to need some millstones as well. And so we'll come back, we'll look at setting up some basic stuff there. We'll also look at getting those immersive engineering machines down so we can start working towards getting these finished PCBs. But of course, as always, that is a problem for future Isaac. For now, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up this episode of Forever Factory there.